I'd like to basically invite everyone to the first HNO International Investor Update call. A lot of you have been investors for a very long time, and there's been some dramatic changes and direction that we feel are very positive about the company. And I'm going to kick it off with letting Don, who obviously everyone seems to know because he's the belle of the ball on this call. But Don, I'll let you take over.
All right, listen, guys. I cannot tell you how happy I am to hear from everybody, and so glad that you're able to make this call. Like I said, we come from a lot of us come from a number of years back where we started with HNO Green Fuels, and most of you all are familiar with HNO Green Fuels. That's how you kind of came to know a little bit about HNO. And as you know, one of my objectives has always been is to somehow make our numerous small investors part of a big company one day, and to be on the front end of a multi-million, multi-billion dollar industry. So we have been blessed to have to find some of the best people. Like I said, I have to admit that most of them I didn't find; they just showed up. And any of you all understand anything about the laws of the universe, that's the way it works sometimes. But we have found, or we have been blessed with some of the best people that you can imagine. And just the fact that I was able to take this company into a public company, HNOI is a public company now, and that's a very rare thing. And but the beauty of it is that I'm going to be able to connect all of our investors from the HNO Green Fuels all the way to the HNOI investors. All of them are going to benefit from what we're going to be achieving with HNOI. And we are literally in the hydrogen business. And believe it or not, you know, I have competitors that have raised millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that won't be presenting anything with hydrogen until 2020, 2035, 2030. We're actually going to be producing hydrogen this year. So we're going to be on the forefront of this whole hydrogen infrastructure, unlike anybody else. And it really kind of works out that way because we started off with these little itty bitty electrolyzers, doing something that people didn't realize you could do with these little bitty electrolyzers. But now we have bigger electrolyzers, and we're going to be able to produce hydrogen at some pretty significant rates. But we're going to on this call. I want to introduce. Well, in essence, what we're going to be doing is we're going now from R&D, which is where we've always been, into full blown production, and that production is going to start in Katy, Texas. A few of you have had the opportunity to make it out to Katy last week. It wasn't that many, but there's a few. But we really had a good time, and I was really glad to be able to expose people to some of the stuff that we're doing out there. We have an unbelievable team, and ultimately we're going to be able to do some things this year that nobody that's we're even competing with can even do. But the bottom line on this call is it's a call to action. You know, we're going to be raising money. We're going to be raising $5 million so that we can do some of the stuff that we really need to do for Katy and for containerizing and doing some other things to our product. But I'm going to first introduce you to Paul Mueller. Paul is our CEO. Now, again, you know, fortunately for me, I'm not the CEO. I mean, not fortunately, but it just so happens that I found somebody better than me to do that job. And so that's Paul Mueller. And so I'm gonna let Paul kind of take over and kind of lead us through some of the other stuff that we're doing, and let Paul give you some of his background. But again, I'm gonna tell you guys something. Y'all just don't know this because you couldn't, because it's just so many great people that we have somehow connected to and found. And so Paul is one of them. And but it's just so many, and they're just all over the world. People are, I mean, just everywhere. But we've all been blessed by these very very good people that have the same goals in mind as we do, which is to make this company something else. Okay, well, Paul, if you don't mind, you can go ahead and kind of give your background and kind of lead everybody through everything.
Sure, Don. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your glowing recommendation. Hopefully, I'll prove myself worthy of it. But it's a pleasure to meet everybody on the call. Again, my name is Paul Miller. I have had the honor and pleasure of serving as the CEO for HNOI for approximately a year and a half. I'd been affiliated with Don and HNO previously as a consultant, and he was kind enough to give me the opportunity to help him grow his vision into something that we're getting ready to take operational. So my background, I come out of 35 years of aerospace and defense, product development, manufacturing, post-deployment support. Spent a lot of time in the C-suite running the organization. So this is a great opportunity for me to take Don's vision and work with his team and help to bring that to fruition for all of us. So I want to say thanks to Don for your vision and support, and then also to everybody on the call for all of your continued support of our efforts to bring clean green hydrogen to the market. So it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm very delighted to be CEO of the company. So common challenges. One of the things that we did in moving from, and I can't emphasize enough where our transition is from research and development to actual commercialization and productization and deployment. Don set a tone when we really started looking at the transition from R&D into operations, and he kind of alluded to it, that a lot of people have raised more money, but they probably haven't achieved as much as we have. And Don's guidance has always been point, don't talk, right? So let's build the product, let's do something tangible, demonstrate our capabilities, get that to market first. And so that's been really instrumental in the progress that we've made over the last year. We spent a lot of time as we were looking at how to transition from the EV market, right? So like electric vehicles, hydrogen is going to need an infrastructure for itself to really take hold, right? So we focused on looking at what happened with the EV and the lack of infrastructure, how it's impacted their deployment, and kind of the curve of the appeal of the EVs. So what we've been focusing on is really looking at trying to solve some of the common challenges. Lack of infrastructure, right? Most of the hydrogen today is made kind of along an oil and gas model, right? Centralized production, national distribution. We'll talk a little bit about that. The cost and time to market for most of the folks, and the hydrogen is really being driven right now at the national level by the Department of Energy. So you've got large-scale government involved. They're looking at large-scale projects, capitally intensive, long time to get to market. What we've done in the last year and a half, and I'll show you some examples and I'll show you where we're taking those. What we've done in the last year and a half to get product to market, the government's taken 2 years to get a study contract, right? So all of that large scale hydrogen stuff that's being used to address the lack of infrastructure is out there in time. So that's something that is going to impede the adoption of the hydrogen market. Cost and time, capitalization, time to get to market. Those projects are usually in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're taking 5 to 10 years at least to get online. And then we'll talk a little bit about the growth of market, but the other interesting thing is that the end users and the hydrogen users are developing as we speak, right? So that there's a set of traditional hydrogen users, and they manufacture their own hydrogen, but because hydrogen is seen as the next generation clean energy, there are a lot of new people coming online looking at hydrogen as a fuel source. So those are kind of the challenges that we're facing right now. The distribution model that we have here kind of plays into understanding why the current hydrogen planning isn't necessarily going to meet the objectives. And hydrogen goes through a lot of process. So it's made at a main plant. Again, like oil and gas, you have these centralized production facilities. And then you have a whole lot of ancillary steps, right? So you take the energy in, looking at this chart, you take the feedstock, produce the hydrogen, then you have to transport it, you have to liquefy it, then you have to store it and transport it. And all of these things take time and energy in the process. And so an example of the current hydrogen production and distribution dilemma is that you can buy, and this was a study that was done, analysis that was done by Wall Street Journal, I think, and I can find the reference for anybody that's interested. But basically, you can buy a kilogram of hydrogen for $7, say down on the Gulf Coast, right? By the time you transport it, and to transport hydrogen long distances, you have to liquefy it, which is energy added. Then you have things like boil off, so the liquid hydrogen isn't as stable. Then you have to put it back in the gas. So long story short, you can buy it at $7 a kilogram down in Louisiana. By the time you get it to the pump in California, the consumer's paying $35 a kilogram at the tank, right? And a Toyota Mirai takes 5 kilograms, so you can do the math. You're talking over $120, $130 dollars to fill a tank. So that's kind of where the world is, and I'll talk a little bit about how we address those issues. But to look at the market size that we're dealing with, and this is why there are a lot of people being attracted to the market. If you look at 2023, $6.4 billion is the total market in green hydrogen. You look at where we're looking at 2029, and that hydrogen demand is growing at over 50% compound annual growth rate. And so you can see the numbers of the current hydrogen production. Hydrogen refueling happens to be something we'll talk about. And then just overall green hydrogen market is about 84 billion. So you can see that it's growing very rapidly and is going to require some unique approaches to satisfy that market based on what we talked earlier, the lack of availability, transportation, all of those things. So our solution is really to change the dynamics of the hydrogen production and distribution market and go from centralized production, national distribution, to regional production and local distribution, right? So get a lot of the cost out of the hydrogen by actually building small, scalable hydrogen production facilities that can provide hydrogen for a broad range of capabilities, everything from just offtake for normal industrial users to refueling for heavy and medium logistics and eventually passenger cars and the like. One of the advantages of our approach is it's less costly and less time consuming. So we can, if we talk about SHEP, the scalable hydrogen energy platform that is really the central piece of our offering, that SHEP is, under single digit millions to invest in and probably about 18 months to get fielded and up and producing, right? And we're still working on those numbers in the time to market. But we have a lot more flexibility to put the hydrogen where it needs to be rather than building the large scale facilities and then distributing it. And this approach allows us to access all the diverse markets. And we're looking at everything from hydrogen production for industrial offtake, refueling markets. We think that the long haul logistics and even medium logistics, which is currently on diesel, isn't going to be able to transition to electric vehicles just from weight and capacity and those types of things. But hydrogen makes a very reasonable substitute for diesel engines, and there are a lot of people in the logistics industry that are working on hydrogen versions of the 18-wheel long-haul trucks, and so we're talking to them. But there's a lot of we're also looking at backup energy for data centers. Any place there's a use of diesel for power backup generation or backup power generation, we think there's an application, and we're working with some partners to help exploit that. So we see a lot of new emerging markets that haven't been addressed, that our ability to go locally, build regionally, distribute locally, gives us access to those markets in a way that our competitors will not have those. And we're very proud to say that we are made in the U.S., which helps us in a lot of different ways, but we're supporting our industrial base. So this is kind of our go-to-market strategy. These are the major elements of the current product line. On the left-hand side, you'll see our strategic partners. Element 1 Energy is our electrolyzer supplier, designer and supplier, and Pneumatic and Hydraulics is our compression, storage, and dispensing manufacturer. In the middle, you see our 3 basic products that I'll talk about. The one on the upper left is what we call our SHEP, Scalable Hydrogen Energy Platform. On the right is our compact hydrogen refueling station. And then in the middle is our emergent product, which is a containerized version of SHEP, right? So it's a hydrogen production, but in transportable containers that give us a lot more flexibility in how we deploy and how we can redeploy. So the SHEP system, this is kind of the cornerstone. This is what we're building in Katy and we'll have online in the fall timeframe. Basically, it produces, compresses, and stores 500 kilograms of hydrogen a day. And that's a pretty significant number. So if you look over on the capacity, when we're talking about refueling or other uses of the hydrogen, we can fill 10 Class B semi-trucks per day, 20 buses per day, vehicles. So that gives you an idea of the capacity of this relatively small footprint for hydrogen production system. So we're very excited about it. This is our compact hydrogen refueling system, and this was actually the brainchild that Don and Greg had at an offsite meeting we had about a year and a half ago, a little over that, but not more, where we conceived that very much like electric vehicles, if hydrogen was going to take off, then there had to be some ready access to a hydrogen refueling infrastructure. So this was our first cut. And the functionality is we actually were able to provide or to produce a small amount of hydrogen, 5 kilograms, compress it, store it, and then refuel a Toyota Mirai that we had down in Houston. So we've already demonstrated the ability to make hydrogen locally, store it and compress it in this footprint that you see, and then dispense it into private and commercial vehicles. So the flexibility of this system is we can either use it as a standalone system for small communities, or we can tie it to a SHEP and use it as a refueling station and just a multi-use hydrogen dispensing station. So those are kind of the two key components. These are pictures of our site that we're going to be installing the SHEP on. You can see we're working with our partners at PHC. That in the upper picture, that left-hand field right now is we're designing the facility, and we should be breaking ground there. And again, be able to have that SHEP up and running, and the capacity again will be 10 semis a day, 200 buses a day, whatever combination of those and offtake that we can support.
And Paul, you may want to bring up the unique nature of the SHEP 1 design is that it's really meant to be a showpiece, right? So that people can come in, see the components. It's meant to be walkable, and it's a kind of a highlight showpiece that we are going to use to attract customers to the long-term product.
Yeah, and just to enhance that a little bit, it will be an operational facility. So when we say we're moving from research and development into operations, Katy will be our first site up and running, and we will be selling offtake, and we are in the process of negotiating offtake agreements with other, I'll say, transportation folks, names that are reputable. We're not ready to kind of go prime time on that, but that'll actually be an operational revenue generating facility in addition to our showcase. Okay, so thank you for that, Craig. Where we're headed, and this is again the transition from research and development into operations. We still have some R&D to do. Our next move, in addition to upgrading the CRIS to the next generation, is we're working on containerization of the SHEP. So rather than having a fixed site at a fixed location, the idea here is, and we've done some initial studies, we believe we can take all of the equipment from the static site at Texas and build a containerized version that we can now go drop in interesting places. One of the places we're looking at, there's again, industry's not going to go to hydrogen, especially commercial industry, until they know that they've got a reliable source available. And so our real focus is to try and get hydrogen infrastructure in a position where we can deploy it fairly quickly. And this is the model that we think will get us there. We're working on things, just so you know, the evolution of hydrogen refueling in the long haul logistics industry. There are a couple of projects that we're peripherally involved in, trying to get more involved in, regarding I-40, what's called an I-40 corridor hydrogen program, and then an I-10 hydrogen corridor program down in Texas. And the idea would be take advantage of the existing diesel freight infrastructure, Love's, Flying J's, all of those truck stops that have all of the infrastructure to support the long haul industry, and be able to take these containerized versions, drop them on the back of an existing footprint, be able to tie into either their grid power or solar power. We're working with some folks on that, and be able now to have a hydrogen refueling capability that's dropped on top of the current diesel trucking infrastructure. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. The one thing I forgot to say earlier, while we're talking about SHEP as a 500 kilogram a day system, which is in manufacturing right now, we do have our partners, Element One, do have a 100 kilogram a day production capability that's a downsized version of our electrolyzer and balancer plant that is up and running. So at the right time, we'd be happy to demonstrate that the technology works and we're actually producing hydrogen up in Colorado Springs. This just talks about the applications. I've talked about most of them. Land developers, we're working with tribal nations and underserved communities for energy. That's a big push right now. The off-takers we've talked about, refueling, municipalities, hospitals, those types of things have some opportunities where we can look at using hydrogen as a fuel source for fuel cells to provide electricity for some of these things. Obviously, the fleet operations, and then data centers is a big emerging market that we're looking at. So you can see that there's a variety of applications that that we can use our core technology to support. So the market isn't just a single thread. So we're excited about that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Craig and ask him to walk us through the pro forma. So we've put together a financial pro forma forecast based on some of our assumptions that we find pretty attractive and pretty exciting. So Craig, let me turn it over to you.
So really, Don brought me on to look at what does it take to move into commercialization, and how can we do it with a minimum capital outlay. As Don mentioned, everyone in the hydrogen industry has raised well in excess of $100 up to $1 billion to become a real company. And Don, recognizing that we're kind of fitting ourselves into this distributed model and niche model, how can we grow this company and create something significant without breaking the bank and going to large venture capital firms and diluting out original shareholders? And really what it is a pretty simple model, right? Because I think hydrogen is such a fast growing emerging market. There's two different things that we're really excited about. Number one, I could just build this SHEP and I could sell them to end customers and let them produce their own hydrogen, and maybe we add on a service contract and we support the service. But where I get excited about is more about the recurring revenue model. And the recurring revenue model is what I call the SHEP service model, where we sell hydrogen as a service. So instead of just selling the hydrogen or selling the equipment and letting them get the benefits of it, what happens if we finance a piece of equipment, land it on site, and then we sell them hydrogen, maybe not at the $35 they're paying today, maybe we charge them $20 a kilogram, and we get the benefit of being I'm going to say the stakeholder in building these plants. And so what I had to look at is really building a combination of two to allow the company to grow. We're going to sell some as equipment, and so that'll bring fresh cash flow into the company. And then when we got enough cash flow started, then we can deploy that into selling the hydrogen as a service model. And the reason we like hydrogen as a service model is it's recurring revenue, right? So every month we get a check from the hydrogen that we sell, and that is that creates more value for the company. It creates more value for the shareholders, and will dramatically improve our position in the long term. So what I've done here is what I would say is take a fairly conservative view of what can happen in this company. And from 2024 to 2028, we're talking about growing to $65 million in revenue. I think you all saw Paul's original graph that this is going to grow to an $85 billion industry by 2030. So what I want to do is put a message out there is that we can build a very successful company being very, very conservative in our approach, but we also believe that there's tremendous upside. So this is what I would consider a base case model, which tells us we're a real company with real opportunity and real revenue and real profits that can pay back as value to the shareholders. But if you ask myself and anyone else that's seeing what's happening in this industry, we think this is a pretty conservative case. So we're going to share this presentation so you can look at the numbers and we can get into the numbers at a later date and time. But this just kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that we're thinking and how we came across this, how we looked at this market and how we wanted to be part of the larger part of the development. As I mentioned here, this has been kind of the deal. Anytime you come to market with a new emerging technology, you want to extract as much value out of the product and service you provide. And so, as I mentioned, you could sell this equipment directly to the customer. They'll pay $4.5 million for a SHEP, or I could set up a leasing and let them lease the equipment, and upfront on a purchase they'd pay $9.4 million. With a lease, because there's cost to the lease, it's $10.9 million. Or I could tell you tomorrow I'll land a SHEP at your door, and I will basically just charge you for the hydrogen that you purchase. And that is a compelling argument to get customer adoption accelerated and motivated to do business with you. So we believe this is kind of the winning strategy. We've got some really nice financial models that show what we believe we can charge versus these other options, and the importance of being able to be kind of a full service hydrogen provider, where we not only provide the hydrogen, but we service the equipment, we maintain all the equipment. There's nothing that the end customer has to worry about. And I'll give you a good example. There's a company in Salt Lake that is building hydrogen trains, and today they consume, lo and behold, about 400 to 500 kilograms a day building these trains and running them on a test track. They do not have currently a provider. They put hydrogen, or they do not produce hydrogen on site. They're buying it for 30, as Paul said, between $32 and $35 a kilogram. If I could take that innovation company and sell it as a service and sell it to them for 15, 16, 18, 20 bucks a kilogram, I save them a tremendous amount of money. And they're part of an inland port in Salt Lake City, and all of a sudden we become a hydrogen hub for other companies that may want to feed off that same hydrogen generation that we're doing. So that's what we're excited about. Is I think we become the enabler of innovation for places that just couldn't normally go buy hydrogen just off the shelf for 35 bucks a kilogram. But I think we can enable the type of growth that is projected in this industry. So if we take a look at the use of funds, this kind of ties back into the financial model of trying to raise what I would consider the capital required to get to our proof of concept and the things that we need to do. Don mentioned this is really a call to action. It's a $5 million that we're looking to raise within the company. I think the story is fantastic. I think the leadership is fantastic. And I think that we have all of the components to be able to not only knock out this raise, but any raise that we do in the future. But really, this funding is to get us to that point. The next gating item, the next milestone, is get SHEP built in Katy, get the engineering done so we can show SHEP 2 out the door, and then move this company into full level revenue generation and profitable EBITDA. So out of that, $1.5 million is going to go out to complete SHEP. They've already spent a tremendous amount of money getting it ready and prepared. There's been a lot of equipment purchase, but $1.5 million is to finish that SHEP. And once again, that's the showcase. That's where our sales team is going to drag customers in and say, do you want something like this? It's proven, it's working, it's operational, and that will drive customer demand. And then we're going to spend $500,000 to work on containerizing SHEP 2 and making sure that we got a mobile and modular system that we can deliver to customers. We got $500,000 for what I consider business development. And then this $2 million part of what I call the HSM is a hydrogen service model, where we think that if we can get a couple early adopter customers by offering to put the plant there and selling hydrogen as a service, we get a heck of a lot larger return by doing that. And if we can, with $2 million, it'll be the best return investment on a small installation that we could ask for. So that's where the $5 million is going to go. And as Paul mentioned, the team that we're pulling together, Don had an already fantastic team. He continues to add new components. You know, I was brought on the financial modeling. I've got a team of people that work in not only the data center field, but for customer acquisition in multiple areas of what we would consider microgrids, where green hydrogen is going to play a significant role. So the team is much bigger than what is shown here. So here's really the call to action that Don has been asking for. We're looking to raise $5 million. This is a value benefit to the existing shareholders of the company, because typically once you go public, you know, you're buying shares and in and out of the public offering, and you might be paying the price that you're seeing on the ticker symbol. This is a special offer to everyone that's on this call. And Don has offered to open this up to not only yourself, but any friends and family you might bring to the table. And it's a common stock offering. I don't want to call it a blue light special, but it's a special deal. And it's because he recognizes that the people on this call helped him build it to the company that it is today. And we want to reward those people as much as we can as we participate on the longer in the longer goals and objectives of the company. So really what this is, it's a private stock offering. And so there's some regulations around this that kind of require a couple things, and I'll just bring them up. Is number one, the minimum investment on this is $20,000. And this is really opened only to what we basically call accredited investors. And those are people that can state that they got $1 million net worth. There's a couple categories that can qualify you as an accredited investor. Some of it involves if you're in part of a trust, some of it's part of it just individual. But Don put a pretty attractive offer on here that, you know, it's a minimum investment of $20,000, and we recognize that, you know, not everyone on this call may be able to have $20,000 in their pocket. But if you've got friends or family or anyone else that could participate and help us reach our objective, we're trying to make this pretty attractive. Today, the stock is selling at, Paul, I think you said $1.17 a share. You know, where we're looking at is that if you were able to invest 20 to 50,000 is 55 cents a share. If you jumped in over to 50,000 to 250,000, it's 20 cents a share. And if someone came in and wanted to make a large investment over 250,000, it's 12 cents a share. So that's a significant discount to the price where the stocks are trading today. And this is because Don has offered this out as kind of what we call a private offering in a public company. If you ever think about it, it's kind of think about Wall Street. You know, it's always the Wall Street guys that were offering these incentive shares for people to be able to participate, and everyone goes out there and has a hell of a time. This is kind of one of those offerings, and Don kind of has led this charge to be able to say, hey, incentivize the shareholders that currently got us to where we are. Now, the only thing to make note of here is because these stocks are sold in a private offering, that they need to be held for 6 months from the time that you buy them. But once 6 months is up, you can go into the market and sell the shares as anyone else would in a public company. And it's a little bit different for me because I've always dealt in private companies where the only time that you had an exit event was that if I sold the company or I did an IPO, Don has kind of turned the tables. He already did an IPO, so he could provide, what I would say is a liquidity opportunity for the people that have been there. And so when stocks rise and stock price goes up, you can sell your shares and get a little bit of money out or all your money out. So I think there's a couple things in here. Is Don at the end of this has kind of basically stated that what we are going to do is after this call, we're going to send an email out to everyone, and there'll be a subscription questionnaire to just qualify that you're a qualified or accredited investor. And then based upon that information, you could just simply indicate the amount of shares that you're looking at buying. And this thing was fully automated. So this is a pretty slick way to get after it and help the company reach the next level that we're looking for. And once again, if this is the investment amount is a little too much than what you've looked at in the past or what you're comfortable investing, but you've got a brother, a friend that is interested in hearing the story, this whole thing has been recorded. You could share it with them, and we will definitely follow up to make sure that we take care of them. So while I get done with that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing the screen if that's okay, so that I can see the questions that are coming up in the chat.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make one little comment about where we are. This is I can't even begin to express how unique we are, the place that we are, in terms of having a public company, having it being reported directly to the SEC, having once we have revenues, we know that we're going to be able to uplist to one of the other exchanges, the NASDAQ or another exchange. We know that. We know that's going to happen. And what is so unique about this is that this is one of those things where you hear about or you don't hear about, where like when Microsoft got started or when Apple got started or when one of these other Amazon got started. They brought in people that had a lot of money in order to be able to invest. They didn't even think about people that had $20,000. If you didn't have 20 million or something, you weren't even considered. That's the beauty about what we have right now. It's just very, very unique. So we're gonna have people, and again, even if, and again, some of you guys have questions about HNOI and HNO Green Fuels, the two different companies, but both are going to benefit because HNOI exists, and but HNOI is this is a very, very, very unique opportunity for just about anybody when you really understand who was in the front of Walmart, who was in the front of Apple, and it's usually the very, 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 very wealthy people already that become even more wealthy. But this time, be regular people like us. And so I really encourage people to really understand what this is and what the opportunity really truly is, and because it can create some pretty generational wealth for a lot of people. But
that's a great comment.
Yeah. So what? Oh yeah. No, you said.
So Don, let me ask you, there's a quick question on here that I think is good, and you or Paul can answer. What is being done to set up HNOI for success within the markets targeted?
Two aspects to that, right? One, if I could, Don, and then I'll defer to you. But there are two. That question has two components. One is, and the answer to the first component is we have been and continue to identify key technical partners that help us put the system together, right? So we're really a systems design and integration house. And so that's where, getting ready to go to market to satisfy the technical requirements, that's where we're teaming with people like Element One, teaming with people like, P8 pneumatics and hydraulics for the compression and stuff. So we're picking key technical partners that are uniquely qualified to help us satisfy the system requirements of the things that we're building. The other part of that is how do we draw ourselves into the market? And we're in the process, and this is something Craig and Kirk are helping us with, of looking at industrial partnerships who can take our hydrogen generation subsystem and use them as part of their overall or larger system offering. As a, for instance, we're talking with some folks about data centers and how can we take our SHEP and a fuel cell and now now start providing power to the data centers. So it's a combination of technical partners to help make sure we have the best technical solution out there, that it's flexible, dynamic, and reliable, and then business partners that are helping draw our products through their work that they're doing into the market to augment their offerings. Does that make sense? There's kind of a couple.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great summary. And so here's a great question. There's two questions that are kind of combined, so I'm going to use the one that I think is probably applicable. It says, we hear so much about electric vehicles. What is the advantage of hydrogen over electric? And do you foresee a downturn in electric should hydrogen become popular, and why?
Okay, I just wanted to add one little thing to Paul's comment to the last question. And it's a statement called point, not talk. And what point, not talk means is we're going to have something up and running. We're going to have something that we can point to. Most people are in the hydrogen business are talking. I was reading an article that I got from one of our investors about some company in Houston. They're going to be spending $2 million on studies for the next 2 years. While they're studying, we're going to be producing hydrogen. So, that's our mechanism to the marketplace is going to be based on pointing and not talking. We're going to show people how it's done. But anyway,
great comment. Great comment. So
you can go back to that other question, Craig.
So Paul, do you want to kind of address the advantage of hydrogen over electric? And I think we're obviously probably talking about commercial vehicles versus consumer vehicles is the big difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that the transportation applications for hydrogen for the foreseeable future are going to be focused more on the long haul and medium logistics, right? So those markets that are currently served by diesel vehicles. So I think the first penetration in the market is going to be, and we've got people like Cummins who are working on internal combustion hydrogen engines. They're also working on hydrogen fuel cell engines for the long haul vehicles. So I think hydrogen is really not going to have an impact on what I call the POVs, the personally operated vehicles, right? The small stuff. And there isn't really going to be, for the short term, a large competition between hydrogen and electric in the passenger vehicle market. There are companies, and we're in some preliminary conversations with some of them, but obviously Toyota has a hydrogen-powered vehicle. There are several other companies that are working on them. The problem of them being adopted in the United States is the lack of hydrogen infrastructure. So California has been the only place that really has tried to put in a robust hydrogen refueling infrastructure for the passenger vehicle market, and it's just really failed. Shell, who had, I think, 8 hydrogen refueling stations up in the Bay Area, they've closed 7. They only have 1 left because they just weren't getting the return on them. And they also walked away from I want to say it's a 40-something million grant by the U.S., by the government, by Department of Energy, to produce 28 more refueling stations. They walked away from it just because of the lack of reliability on hydrogen delivery, right? The example I used earlier of 7 to 35 by the time you get it to the pump. There's a lack of reliability in some of the compression units. So I think at that level, EV is going to continue to be pushed forward. Eventually, when hydrogen becomes prolific in the medium and heavy logistics area, then I think that'll open the market for hydrogen. I think hydrogen vehicles are going to be relatively more efficient. If you look at rare earth metals and carbon footprint, EVs are going to have a higher carbon signature than hydrogen vehicles and the like. So I think it's going to be a transition point, and it's going to take time take a period of time for hydrogen to get up to speed. But I think it's going to be introduced through its infrastructure into the industrial side, and then it'll make itself over into the private side. One of the questions please.
I'm going to bring up a question because I think it's very relevant, and we're running up on the tail end of this. If it's okay if I answer this, it says, is it possible for a group of individuals to pool their money together and purchase 20,000 at the stock price of 55 cents? And the answer is yes. A lot of people will form an LLC with 2, 3, 4, 5 number of individuals and be able to pool that and come in as an investor in a group. And so part of the reasons that we kind of structured and tiered it the way that we did, we understood that not everyone could come in at 20,000. But if you do have a group that kind of tends to invest together, sometimes that's family, sometimes it's friends, that is absolutely an option for you. One of the one that's interesting is someone's asking about, presenting both to the Department of Energy and the Department of Defense. And I will say that one of the reasons Don and Paul brought us on board is Kirk Plautz, who works as a consultant with the company, is 100% dialed into the Department of Defense. And we think that the Department of Defense is looking at these innovative hydrogen approaches. Obviously, the Department of Energy, there's a lot of grant opportunities available. Now, some of those will require that you're tied in with solar, so your true green energy or green hydrogen, which is our intent anyway. So we are working with solar developers. We're talking to primary power producers for data centers that want to use green hydrogen. So between the DOE and the DOD, with the amount of money that's floating out there, we think there's significant opportunity.
Let me just say 2 things. Well, maybe one thing, because I know the main question that everybody has is, when are we going to get a return on our investment? Now, and I think most of you have always known that I have never been able to predict the future, and I can't do it now either. But I can tell you that we are a public company, and we are generating and beginning to generate revenues. When you're a public company in the hydrogen space and generating revenues, like virtually none of these hydrogen companies are, our stock value is going to go through the roof. And when that happens and we start generating revenues, we also move to a different exchange. So, and once we're on a different exchange, everything is different. Everything is, it's a totally different picture. It's a totally different atmosphere. It's almost like before I had HNOI, there was no HNOI. But when we have HNOI at another exchange, there's going to be a different HNOI. So you're going to be looking at things that you can't even imagine. Now, again, nobody can promise anything when it comes to investments. But one thing I can tell you right now is that we do have a solid company right now that has a market cap on the OTC. And once we start generating revenues, we will be on another exchange. And we're going to go to the NASDAQ or whatever we think is appropriate. But when that appropriate time comes, you're going to see a return on your investment. And you can take it or you can just let it ride. But I'm gonna be able to tell you that that the ones and the people that are in this thing right now are going to be just like the people that was in Walmart before Walmart became Walmart.
Good analogy.
And just all I can say is just hold on to your hats. And Craig, I think we're about timed up, so
we are
conclude everything. But I just wanted to say that.
No, Don, great comments, and I did have a question. Are all questions going to get answered? And Paul, we will respond to the remaining questions, 100%. So I appreciate everyone answering or asking questions. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate the fact that everyone stayed on mute. I think this went fairly easy, and I want to thank Don and Paul for sharing their insights and doing an excellent job. So. Anything else, Don, to sign everyone off?
That's good. So everybody can sign off. I appreciate everybody's taking the time to join the call, and we're going to make this thing happen this year.
Amen.
Exciting time. Thanks so much.
Great job.